Children who see spirits or have psychic abilities.
One of the toys that was on the ground was on the windowsill. That daughter couldn't reach the windowsill.
And float towards me in the bathroom. It's awful for a child not to be able to understand what the hell is going on.
This little boy befriended him, and we get him to do things that weren't really good.
Children have memories of death or, tragic passing.
This was activity from an entity outside of the child.
She woke up in the middle of the night and she saw someone standing over her daughter's crib.
My great-great-grandmother, Sally Hatfield, who'd appeared to me when I was 6, appeared to me again.
She told me that she saw a man in the basement.
I thought this topic was really important to talk about.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Medium's Table. I'm your host, Michelle Gardner. This podcast is your personal invitation to join me at the intersection of the everyday and the extraordinary. Together, we'll explore the magic of mediumship, share spiritual stories, and connect with fellow mediums on this incredible journey. So grab a seat, pour yourself a cuppa, and come join us at the Medium's Table, where spirits gather and stories unfold. I'd like to welcome to the show our amazing panel of mediums. They're back again today with another exciting topic: children who see spirits or have psychic abilities. Now, this is a really great guide for parents out there around the world, and not just parents, aunties, uncles, friends, grandparents who have children or know children who have these abilities and don't know what to do with them or need more information. Now, our mediums are going to discuss this for you today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce each one to you today. Now we're going to start with Em. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Em. What are your abilities, so to speak? What do you do and where are you from?
So I'm from Australia and I still live here and country town. I am a hypnopsychotherapist, a medium channel, but my favourite thing to do is healing and Bowen therapy.
Fantastic. Dawn from England.
Well, as Michelle's just said, I'm from Liverpool, which is in England. I'm a spiritual medium, and I do a lot of the mediumship things. I'm not very eloquent this evening, so you'll have to excuse me. I do mediumship, transmediumship, give readings to people. I teach. The list just goes on and on and on. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Dawn from Canada.
Hi.
Sorry, I just ruined that for you.
I'm from Canada, Ontario. I practice evidential mediumship, and I am also a Reiki healer.
Awesome. Thank you, Dawn. Jeanette.
Hi, Jeanette from Miami, Florida, actually Cuban, and very grateful for the United States and all that it's given me. And spiritualism, for me, it's evidential mediumship, some channeling, and some trance. I'm definitely healing individuals with therapeutic techniques through mediumship.
Thank you, Jeanette. Alicia.
Oh, hi. I'm Alicia, and I'm from, right now I'm not at home, but usually my home is in New Hampshire. But I do evidential mediumship, and I also really, really enjoy synchronicities and everything that's an intuitive period, and seeing connections with everything and everyone. And it's my specialty, and I love it.
Awesome. Thank you. Elena.
Hi, I'm Elena and I'm from Ireland, and I'm a spiritual medium, and I'm also learning trance mediumship.
Thank you, Elena. Christian.
Hi, my name's Christian Williams, and I'm an evidential medium as well as a trance medium. And I do public dems on occasion, as well as private sittings for clients.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christian. Kim.
Hi, I am Kim Liddell from Chicagoland area. I am a practicing medium with a background in energy work, holistic energy healing. And thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Now, we're going to get started on this topic today because I think this is, like I said, a very, very important topic for many, many parents around the world. And I'm going to encourage all of you mediums here, if you are listening to someone's story and you have a question that you might want to ask at the end, because this is quite a big topic and there's so many areas to this, I encourage you all to write down your questions so that we can address those on this podcast, because we want to make sure we've got as much information in this as possible for parents. I'm just going to point out for the audience, Kim, you're the exception. Kim is blind, so Kim won't be able to write anything down, but we just want to point this out because Kim is an amazing medium and she shows that there are no boundaries when it comes to doing spiritual work. And she's very much an inspiration to many of us. So, and we thank you, Kim, for being on the show with us today as well. And all the rest of you for being here. Now, we're going to start with M. Tell us about your experiences.
Yeah, well, I can honestly say, even as a kid, I remember growing up thinking I was scared of the dark a lot. There was a lot of times where I was just frightened of being in the dark. And looking back now, I think it was because I was seeing things and feeling things, especially in the dark. And that's why I always wanted a light on, because I would see faces and things like that. But not really knowing what it was about back then. Looking back now, I can see why that sort of was taking place for me. But as a young child, my very earliest sort of psychic ability sort of memory, I guess, was I was probably about 3 or 4, and I remember watching my mother in the laundry, and directly opposite our laundry door faced my neighbour's laundry door, sort of outdoor area, and that happened to be my grandmother's place. And I remember looking out that way and saying to my mother, "Who's that lady over there?" And she would say, "There's no one there." No, and she was very, quite frightened. And I just kept pestering her, "Who's that lady over there that no one could see?" And this went on for a few days. And then eventually one day she said to me, "Even if there was someone there, it was probably your great-grandmother who died in that house." So she knew what I was referring to, but she had a very frightened, I was just curious, but she had a very frightened sort of response, which I didn't understand at the time. And that grandmother just stared at me. Or that great-grandmother, I should say, just stared at me. She didn't have any facial expressions. She was just very stern, sort of looking and just staring out. So she just obviously was just there. But maybe in my mother finally acknowledging, she just disappeared and I never saw her again. And it was funny because only just recently I relayed that story to my auntie, who I hadn't spoken to about that. And she said, even my description of her grandmother was so accurate. She hadn't thought of her grandmother in so long. And she said she had that really stern sort of look and just stared out straight. And I thought, from even my description, she could pick that it was her grandmother. So I found that quite interesting. And then the only other thing that, happened to me was when my grandfather, when he passed, he actually came to visit me as a child. And I remember it so clearly. I was probably about 10 at the time, 8. I'm not really sure on my exact age. But I dreamt, well, I was in my dream state, I suppose I would say, and he had Alzheimer's, and I really didn't know him as someone who I could speak to as such. He was always with dementia. So when he came to me in the dream, he was very lucid and having a conversation with me, and it said, "I just came here to say goodbye." And I said to him in Italian background, but where are you going, Nonno? And he said, don't worry about where I'm going. I just want you to let everyone know that I've come to say goodbye. And I said, I looked at his face and I said, Nonno, you're speaking English, because I'd never, he'd only been Italian. So, and then he said to me, yes, I am. And then I realized that his lips weren't moving. So it was all telepathic. So that was just so intriguing to me. And I was very excited about his death because, number one, he was lucid. We were having a good conversation as such. And not long after that, my mother came into the room and I burst out, Nonno died. And she obviously was not so enthusiastic about that message coming to her. So I think at that point it kind of almost shocked me, her reaction, because I was so excited. And I think I kind of shut down a little bit of my psychic ability after that for a time. I always had knowings about things all through high school and sort of abilities that just suddenly knew things, didn't know why, and obviously sensed and felt things. But definitely there was a time there where I shut down a lot of sort of my abilities. And I think that's one thing, if anything, I can stress is pointing out to people, even if you are, as a parent, if you're frightened at all, just listen and be supportive, I guess, and try to understand.
Yeah, thank you. Now, did you have another experience with a friend or a cousin?
Well, just recently, yes, I had, which is why I thought this topic was really important to talk about, was I had my cousin's daughter, and they spoke to me about their child, who I think is 4, was seeing spirits. So, and there was a particular incident which sort of worried a lot of them, because she was in the room by herself, or with her mother, and she was playing with some toys, or a particular teddy bear, I think it was. And she'd been seeing things previous to this that they kind of were brushing off a little bit or just wasn't sure about. But this particular day, the mother walked out for just a second to turn something off, and then was on her way back, and the young girl was saying, man, 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 in the bedroom. And so she quickly rushed in there, and one of the toys that was on the ground was on the windowsill. And so that was the point where they were completely sort of a bit freaked out, because that daughter couldn't reach the windowsill.
Wow.
So there's an unknown there.
You would die, would you not? Seriously, I would die.
And of course, she was very, very concerned about that.
So is she experienced in this field? Did she know what to do, or has she now come to you about this?
No, my auntie actually came to me, and I spoke to them about it. And look, I do clearings and so forth. So I did actually go in and do some clearings, and this is just from a distance. And then they also spoke to other people within their family members who had similar or some experience, nothing like that, but similar.
Incredible. Yeah. Wow, that's incredible.
But that's why I think it's really important to just talk to people about it, because, you can let fear shut you down as opposed to just talking about these things and getting the information. And there's not been anything since. That was it. That was, and my auntie was aware enough to say when the child came to her house, no, we don't have anything like that. You say, go away. And she never, ever had that experience in my auntie's house. It was more happening at her house. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, as a child who has experienced seeing spirit and having visitations, what do you think your parents could have done maybe a little bit differently, or how would you have felt you could have had better support?
It's sort of hard to say, but I just think that definitely not having the fear would have been helpful, because Mind you, I do understand, someone saying, someone's died and being excited about it. It wasn't exactly the easiest thing to deal with as such. But I just think that if they had back then too, it was a very spooky sort of subject. So it probably still is for a lot of people. I think just being open to it and just understanding and just listen.
Yeah.
Listen, and maybe ask even questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Em. And it's a different time, different age now, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Em. Fascinating. English Dawn.
God, I was just listening to when she was saying, and don't have the fear. Am I the right person to be given advice? Because I'm scared of everything.
No.
Yeah, no. So
actually, you are, Dawn. You are, because the majority, I think, of everyone, when something surprises you and it's unexpected, even if it's like a popping out, how everybody loves, I don't know, my family, everybody likes to spook everybody who laughed, and you hide behind something that's coming and you pop out and you get startled because it's unexpected. So
absolutely,
I think that's the human condition.
But I think I'm a bit of a scaredy cat with everything. The funny thing is, when I was a kid, I didn't experience anything at all. And it was only when I hit like teenagerhood. Sorry, I'm jumping. I'm going to retract, and I'm going to talk about my daughter first, and then I'll talk to you about that experience. So I've got 4 daughters, and when one of them started senior school, so for people, in other countries, senior school means they start a high school at like 11 over here. So she started this new school, and, she's a really confident kid and she's loving it. And then one day she comes home sobbing, absolutely sobbing. And I said, "Oh my God, what on earth is the matter?" And she said, "I want to die." And of course, I was like, oh my God, what the hell's gone on? And, all these thoughts are going through my head. And I said, why? I said, what on earth is wrong? And she said, I can feel everybody's sad, everybody's happy, and everybody's heartache. Well, I was like, what the hell? So I kind of took a step back from it, and by this point, I was working as a medium, so I kind of knew what to do. And I was like, okay, let me just kind of assess this. What is she actually experiencing? So it wasn't spirit, but she was psychically picking up on everybody else's energy. Their sadness, somebody walks past you and, they've had maybe an argument with their parents or whatever, and she's picking up on that energy. And then the next person is, completely elated and she's feeling that energy. And then somebody else is really angry. And all of this has been, she's been bombarded with people's emotions. So I kind of thought, okay, I'm going to have to get to grips with it, and I'm going to have to do something with her, which I wasn't really ready for, but, she needed it. So I said to her, okay, this is what it is. And I explained to her that she's picking up on people's emotions. And what we can do is we can do like a visualization, and we can close it down completely if you want, or we can just put it on hold. So she said, well, how do we do it? And I said, okay. So I got her to sit down, closed her eyes, and I talked her through a guided meditation, basically saying, okay, visualize you own a shop, and this shop isn't serving you at its best at the moment. So what I want you to do is you have a door, and on the door you have a sign which says closed or open. I want you to turn the sign to closed. I said, or I've got a hammer here. You can smash the shop to pieces if you want. Because it was her choice whether she, goes forward with these feelings, these emotions, being able to read people's energy. And she said, no. She said, I think I'll just close the door and I'll put the close sign on, and quite, I'm not really ready for it, but I don't want to get rid of it completely. So that's what we did. And from that minute onwards, she wasn't bothered by other people's energy. So for people who don't know actually what it is, everybody has psychic abilities. When you walk into a room and you think, oh my God, the energy in here is bad. You can feel that somebody's had an argument, and that's what she was feeling all the time. So it was quite intense. She's 27 now, still hasn't opened up. But I have to say she's a brilliant, brilliant medium, or she will be. So going back to when I was a kid, when I started senior school, so like I said before, I didn't have any experience of spirits when I was a child. When I hit senior school, I used to burst out crying for no reason. And I'd get taken to see the school nurse, and the school nurse would say, Dawn, what's wrong? And I'd think, oh my God, I'm going to have to make up a lie here. So I'd say, oh, my nan died. She hadn't. She was still alive and kicking. But I used to go to the nurse quite regularly in tears. And I never understood why. And obviously, I was picking up exactly the same as my daughter was on people's energy, their sadness, not my own, because there was no rhyme or reason for me bursting into tears. I was a go-getter in school. I was a lively child. What can I say? So that wasn't me. And yeah, so I was wide open to the energy that I was picking up from people. So I guess, for any parents out there whose kid is experiencing a similar thing, first of all, pause and kind of like try to analyze why they're feeling emotional. Is there a reason for their emotions? If there isn't, it could very well be that they're actually picking up on other people's energies. So ask the kids, what are your friends like? Are they happy, or are they having problems or issues? Because you could be feeling what they're feeling. So to use it, to put it in a language that they understand, rather than using technical terms like psychic abilities and all that kind of stuff. So putting it, in basic language. So it was a really, really worrying time, because that was not her. She was just like me at school, confident, funny, loving, and then all of a sudden she's talking about not wanting to be here anymore. That really scared the life out of me. So as I say, we've never had any issues since. I occasionally drop it into conversation. Neve, when are you gonna kind of like open up? And she's like, yeah, not talking about it. So she's not interested in it yet. Whether she will in the future, I don't know. But it's important to know your child. Know what they're going through, and think about the people around them. And do you know what? And also for yourself as well. Sometimes we feel emotional, and there's really no reason for it. What are other people close to us experiencing? Because sometimes we're picking up on their emotions, not our own. So yeah, that's kind of like my experience with psychic energy in children.
Yeah, that's some really great advice there, Dawn. And your daughter's very, very fortunate that she has someone with so much experience to turn to when that time happens. And we'll say when, not if.
I'm a firm believer it will be when, because as we all know, spirit, when they're ready for you, boy, it happens, and you think, oh my holy God, what on earth is this? But you're drawn into it, and it's an incredible life to lead. But yeah, no, so that was my experience.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. Remarkable. And like I said, you got some really great advice going on in there as well for parents. Really great advice. Canadian Dawn.
Oh, hey. Well, I've got a couple of kids I want to talk about. The first one is my nephew, and he is 40 now. But when he was 3 years old, his mom had told me that he had an invisible friend. And I can't remember what his name was, but he had a really weird name for him. And so my sister-in-law had said at the end of the hallway where all the bedrooms are, there was a big mirror. And she said she would get fleeting glimpses of this little boy. And she said he was dressed in the old-fashioned little Lord Fauntleroy type clothing. And so my nephew, his name is Travis, I guess this little boy befriended him, and we get him to do things that weren't really good. He told him to jump off the deck, just really strange things. And so finally, I think the straw that broke the camel's back was Travis had shoved pennies up his nose. And his mom said, "What are you doing? What'd you do that for?" And he said, "Well, so-and-so told me to." So my sister-in-law had finally had it, and she yelled at this spirit and told him to get out of this house, don't come back ever again. And she was just really, really mad. And she said he never came back. We never, ever saw him again. So that was one. So then now my oldest son, he had a couple of funny little episodes when he was about 2.5 to 3, just that magical age, eh? I was getting him ready early in the morning. I was going to work or something, and he was laying on the floor and I was getting him dressed. And he says, "Oh, Nana's here." And my husband's mom had passed. Probably, it was less than a year at that point. And I went, "Oh," and I looked towards where he was looking and I didn't see anything. And I'm like, "Oh, that's so nice." And he would just do like say funny things. Like one time my husband took him to a hockey game, and he stopped in at Walmart first. He had to buy him a new coat. And so as they're pulling in the parking lot, he said, "Wouldn't it be so funny if Aunt Shannon was beside us at the hockey game?" And my husband's like, "Yeah, wouldn't that be funny?" Well, didn't she pull in the parking space right beside them? and my husband's like, "Oh, okay." So I thought that was just fantastic, But we always just, took it in stride and, just made it all nice. So now this same son, he has a little boy. Now this kid, I always say he is not learning things. He's remembering things. I swear he has been here before. So my daughter-in-law, before she had him, she had 2 miscarriages, and they were just it was very devastating. And so he, what a gift he is. So when he's 5 now, but when he was about 3 years old, he had gone down for his nap, and he gets up and he says, "Mom, do you remember you've had a baby in your belly and it came out? And then you had another baby in your belly and it came out. And then you had another baby in your belly and it came out and it was me." And she says, "I just got right on the phone to you." And she's like, "Dawn, you're not going to believe what Wyatt just said." And I was like, wow, that is just crazy, Yeah, and he's always been really in tune. Now she has been to other mediums. I've done medium reading for her too, but one medium told her that her grandfather, who had passed not very long ago, he always sits with Wyatt on the couch when he watches TV. And sure enough, I was visiting them. They live on the other side of the country. And we were going to watch a movie, and I went to sit down. He's like, no, you sit over there. And I thought, oh, I guess that's where Grandpa sits. But she said just recently, because I just called her this week, and I said, do you mind if I talk about Wyatt? And she's like, sure. And she said, out there in their town, they have this really old tree, and it's called the grandfather tree. And it's got an above ground root system that is just unbelievable. I did see it when I had visited there. And so Wyatt was with his dad, and they were driving, and they went past it. And first off, so my daughter-in-law reads in the paper that the grandfather tree fell down in a storm. And there was a picture of it in the newspaper. And she says to her husband, who's my son, oh, the grandfather tree fell down. Like, this is devastating. And he's like, are you kidding me? He says, Wyatt and I drove by it the other day. And he says, oh, yeah, it's going to fall down. And so my daughter-in-law didn't even know about that conversation until she read it in the paper. And that was only probably a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So, yeah, he's still got her going on. But they are very spiritually open, so anything that he comes out with, they're very supportive of him. They listen to him. And, they're just very positive about how they talk to him and they raise him. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I guess the fact that they support him almost encourages him to continue with his abilities and be able to know that he can say what he needs to say, or intuitively and instinctively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
say
he's
what's
very
on his
open.
mind.
Yeah. Now, one other thing with him, my son had a high school or a childhood friend who passed in a car accident when they were teenagers, and he has a picture of him on his wall. When you go up the stairs to the bedroom. And when Wyatt was just a baby, they would go past that picture. He would always smile and just sort of baby talk at that picture. And I said, you know what? He knows him. I'm sure he's playing with him, So, yeah, he's had this going on since he was very small.
Yeah, wow. And I love your first story, where control steps in with your daughter-in-law and she tells the little spirit boy to get out. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
She just took control.
So mad. Yeah, that's it. You're causing him to do really bad things. Incredible.
So,
and
that's
that
amazing.
works, if you have that force of emotion, you can get rid of these bad spirits and banish them. So,
taking back your own power.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, two different sides of the coin, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dawn. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Jeanette.
Wow. I can relate to so much of that. I think that the key there was the parents' focus and being alert to what was going on and receptive makes all the difference. It seems like it's a very simple thing, but which ties in beautifully. It's almost like we orchestrated it, but we didn't, into my story. So I think I've come to know that I was kind of like a natural born medium. My grandfather was a medium. Unbeknownst to me, my mom was strict Catholic, and my dad grew up where every Friday night, all the aunts and uncles got together and had a seance. So I guess they had an agreement when they got married. The kids are not going to know anything about that world. And we're going to church, and this is what's happening, which would have been ideal if the whole spirit world would have been included in that conversation. But they were not. So here you have then children growing up going, what is that doing there? What am I hearing? Does no one else hear it? And being completely lost. My first clue in was my brother and I, we were 4 children, were somnambulistic. We were sleepwalkers. I only knew of my sleepwalking because the next morning, my two older brothers would just totally make fun of me and look at you last night, you were doing this. I would just look at them like, wow, they're so far gone. Is that what happens to us as we get older? Is what I would think. They were 6 years older than me. They were preteens. Until one of my brothers started sleepwalking, and there was a whole commotion and everybody would come out. He was adult Chilean. We lived in Los Angeles on a very busy street. We were near a museum. It was a very nice area, but if you made it to the end of the corner of the block, you were in a major intersection, and people would get up to go to work. He would literally unlock the front door and walk out. And I think it was my grandmother who heard him, contacted my dad. Everybody got up. I didn't know what was going on. What ended up happening is my dad would tie a rope around the lock of the front door and rig it to some other furniture. It was like a crazy situation every night so that George would not escape. But there was never any mention past that. Just, oh, your brother's really weird. This is what he does. And you're really weird too, because you come out of your room and you throw your blanket over your head and you sit there and you have full conversations in 2 different languages, in English and in Spanish, and nobody's paying any attention to you. And I'm like, okay, but it's not addressed. It's just like known, but we're going to talk about any of that, So as I start to get a little bit older, an uncle of mine, I think it's the eve of my birthday, I hear this individual come into my room, and I feel a kiss on my cheek and kind of like a little giggle, like sweet, like when a small child does something endearing. And of course, it scared the living daylights out of me. And so basically the covers were up over my head the majority of nights because I didn't understand it. As I got older and I started to hear about, spirits and do my own research, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And then I heard from my cousins, let me tell you, when they promised something, it went to the grave. We had one of our cousins who was adopted. None of us said anything until she found out when she was like 19. There were 17 of us. So when you get into fights and sibling rivalries, and normally you go for the gut. No, there were things that when you made a promise, that was that it was off limits. Nobody ratted it out. So they didn't tell me what was going on. I would see that we would go from where we live to where they live, which is about an hour away. And that was every weekend. Unbeknownst to me, what they were doing is they were continuing to have the seances in the garage of my grandfather's garage. And they would put us with different relatives on my mother's side for sleepovers. But we didn't know what was going on. Why can't I stay with these cousins? I have more fun with them. We get into a lot more trouble than with the other ones. No. You got to go to Aunt so-and-so's house and you got to, okay. Didn't understand any of it. Fast forward a little bit more. My father is having kind of like a nervous breakdown. I'm like a 19-year-old or something. We're at the beach and it's very mellow. Sun is just starting to set. You get that little breeze and you get kind of sleepy, And I thought, oh, I'm going to take a nap now. How cool. Nap, nothing. I know now. I didn't know what happened there. I wake up and I feel like I have been crying. And I look over to my father, Cuban macho man. You cry at funerals. That's the only time really it was allowed. And you only get a little bit of that. And he's sobbing. And I'm like, Dad, what just happened? He's like, thank you, honey. And he gets up and walks away. I'm like, why do I remember somebody kind of talking through me? What? But that was it. I shut it down, threw it in the back, went out with my friends, went drinking, went dancing, listening to bands, and life continued. So for me, I get the path and I get as a couple how that worked for them. But the kids basically, we were screwed because nobody. And then the older people also respected what they wanted to do with us. So it wasn't like there was an aunt who snuck in and said, well, your parents aren't going to tell you this, but that's your Uncle Julio who died at 33, And so they were all very, very tight-lipped. Moving forward, when my daughter then tells me, there's somebody in my room, every time we would turn off the lights, I really paid attention to it. And I'm like, I'm not going to repeat what was done to me. I'm also not going to scare her. So I said, okay, I'll sleep with you or come into our room. And in that house, I got to tell you, I would see full apparitions. I would see them in mirrors. We would be sitting down. It was a 2-story watching TV, and you would hear, it almost sounded like an entire shelf just fell. We both got up, ran upstairs. Nothing. She was fast asleep in her bed, but we both reacted. And my husband was like, not about any of this stuff. And he's like, what was it? I'm like, well, what do you think it was? He goes, no, it can't be what you say it always is. I go, well, then what is it? You tell me. Look around. Everything is in its place. Nothing is on the floor. And yet we both heard that sound. She slept through it. So I was conscientious of that. And when she got a little bit older, depending on her questions or what she would tell me that she was seeing or experiencing, I would address it. And I said, well, your grandma just died, and that's probably her. She was smelling Jean Naté, which was that grandmother's favorite go-to perfume. And I said, yeah, that could be her just peeking and making sure that you're doing okay and just, hanging out with you a little bit and visiting. It's just visiting with you. So this is now the second generation. A cousin of mine that grew up, keeping all those great secrets. He now has a son, and this is really, really cool. His mom was a medium, my aunt. His wife's mom was also a medium. Okay. So this kid is experiencing off the chart things. We had that same aunt that his mom was here in Miami dying, and she was in hospice, and we were gathered around her because we knew that night she was going. And we get a call from my cousin. He says, my son just saw mom walk past and like wave goodbye. And my cousin's on the phone, and as she's talking, straight line. That was it. She was out. She was gone. So it got easier with life. Like another aunt of mine, same family, putting out Christmas decorations, and I hear she was incredibly sweet and always got on my case for not calling her enough, because in this family, at least 3 phone calls a week to all your aunts, and I hear, it sounds like above me, Jeanette, I'm going now. I didn't like that you didn't call me enough, but we're going to have more contact now. And I'm putting together a light up deer, and I'm like, okay, Merry Christmas. And then sure enough, my cousin calls me, my mom just died. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of figured that's what was going on. So I'm hoping now with generation number 3, that cousin, I was talking to him a little bit, preparing for this. And I said, so I'm curious because I don't really have the parental, point of view. I can tell you what it was like for me as a kid. And that if they had been a little bit more open, it would have made things so much easier and really reduced my anxiety and my stress and everything else through life. And he goes, look, we talk about everything with him. We do warn him, though, of the world that we live in. He's in a Catholic school, is where he's at. That's, what they have chosen as far as his education. So we say, do not open your mouth in class to discuss anything. So, it's totally fine that you're experiencing all of this, but at the same time, we want to protect you, not just from ridicule. I mean, it would probably be a huge problem in that school where the parents get brought in and you do it, talk about it again, you're suspended, I mean, that's there's a lot of, regulatory things that they have in place, and that would just create, I think, a huge ordeal. And I don't think we're there yet in society for the kids to be ready for all of that. But they're definitely navigating these waters much better than our predecessors did. And so the hope for me and the faith is that as the generations go on and people understand this a little bit better, we can address it. And instead of being scared when our kid says whatever, we're like, Oh, yeah, where? And tell me about it. And how often does it happen? Engage them to the extent that they feel comfortable talking about it, so that and then they just kind of get bored with it. Like that one kid is like, yeah, she came by and said, anybody, yeah, well, she was here the other day telling me what. He's like, kind of like, it's enough already. Like she can go talk to another one of the grandkids. I'm done. I've seen her enough for now. So
Yeah.
those are really, yeah.
Incredible. So that's realistically, channeling and mediumship is so intertwined within your family, isn't it?
It is, and it's interesting. Like we have one of my second cousins. So again, this would be the third generation here. He's married a Ukrainian girl, lovely, but it's very interesting. The culture and the environment that she grew up in is you look down because you don't want to get into trouble with any of the powers that are walking through the streets, right? You don't know when you're going to accidentally, do something that they created a new law. So they really are very quiet, and they tend to even look down. And then when they're talking to you, once in a while it's eye contact, but this is safe for them. This is safe. And I understand that. So she has really no religion, no God, no religion. And that her husband is the grandson of the medium grandmother, that passed away, that is now popping into and saying hello to everybody. So it's very interesting. And she's kind of opening up and wanting to understand more. They've had their second baby. So I'm kind of fascinated to see how now this new generation unfolds. And how they progress and how we behave towards them. To me, I think it's kind of exciting because I think it can, only grow and become more open and expansive. Definitely, it's not going to go backwards because that's archaic.
Yeah.
So that is my take on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's been married into the right family, hasn't she, to start opening up, and the support is all around her.
All the time, because she's like, Cubans are so loud. We don't talk. You actually see her in a corner like this.
Oh, incredible. Well, it's going to be a one amazing ride for the children, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, the first one is just about 2. So, and I wonder what the linguistics are there and what she's actually saying, because it's a little bit further from me, I rarely see them. So I'm not privy. So I get downloads from my cousin, but she's also just really very reserved. So it's not like she's going to tell her mother-in-law, not that any of us really would, but you'd usually do, oh, she spit up the cereal, little things that, what every little cute baby does. So, but she gives very little information. It's when they come over for a weekend or a week, or they spend actually one-on-one time together, that she really gets to see the behavior and the things that are going on with her developmentally. And that's super fascinating.
Yeah. Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeanette. Sounds like we'll need to do another episode of this a little bit further along the line, and you may have some real new stories to share with us all in their experiences. So thank you so much for that, Jeanette.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Alicia.
Oh, yes. Hello. So you want to hear a story, do you? It's story time. I love it when I come on, and I think I've said this to Michelle and Dawn and maybe a couple others, is when I hear other people's stories, somehow they all connect, and I see the commonalities and the threads of being woven between stories. And it's interesting because the stories I'm going to tell are pieces of each of your stories. And I find that fascinating. It's my thing. So when I was younger, my parents, of course, I had a father who spoke about going to seances with my grandmother. Okay. But very little was spoken about that. My mother's family, however, was from Eastern Europe. And again, there was that lineage, like Jeanette speaking of. My grandmother, her grandmother were all highly psychic and mediumistic. My mother, her sister, her other sister, all had different gifts, but very connected to the whole spiritual thing. And then there became me, here I am. I got a little bit, a piece of each one of them, which was interesting because my mother didn't want anything to do with it. She told me when I was 33, shut up. No, you don't speak of things like this because your grandmother could foretell people who were going to die through dreams. And so including her own and what she was going to die of. So there was this whole fear with my mother that don't use what you have. However, when I was younger, they placated me with my imaginary playmates who were very real because 100% they were spirit people. And my father would say, oh, no, just like someone was speaking about, you can't sit there, don't sit there because Merup or Opie is there. Let's leave room at the table. Let's leave. So it was very interesting. And I think Dawn spoke of that, please don't sit there. Dawn with an E, by the way. Don't sit there. You can't. Because Opie was there, of course. So that was my childhood. And as I grew older and I realized that the rest of the world didn't see things my way. So that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me. And at that time, a lot had happened. And I'm navigating this because here I had littles, they were all living at home. And what did I pass on to them? And I didn't want them to be afraid. And I wanted to have an understanding of how to teach these children to navigate a very different world. And so there we started. So I researched thoroughly and did all kinds of things. But I will never forget, and here's the story. My son comes and he could see them. Oh, he loved them. And we lived in this house. And there was a funeral parlor across the way, and there was a church next door. So it was like we always had like this revolving door of spirits. It was brilliant, but very disconcerting at times. And my one son, like I said, he could see very clearly, clear seeing. And one day he came into my office and he goes, Mom, there's somebody walking and I see them. They're opening up your filing cabinet. They're reading your papers. And I said, really? That's called remote viewing. And they can get out now. And poof, they were gone. And he said, okay. So he says, there's all these people that are in this house, Mom. Do you see them? And I said, well, I can feel them. And he said, I said, you know what I'm going to do, Scott? I'm going to do a clearing on the house. Don't you worry. You're going off to school this morning, and I'm doing a massive clearing. So he says, all right, Mom, but don't get rid of the one man. He's got a flat cap, and he smokes cigars. He's my friend, and he's a good man. Don't get rid of him. And I go, not sure that's going to work out so well, but we'll give it a go, kid. So he comes home from school And I go, how's it going? And he goes, I'm still searching. And I think the guy's name was Bob. He goes, I'm still looking for Bob to come back. And he never mentioned ever again if Bob came back. But shortly after that, he was walking through the house and he had one speak to him. And he lost his cookies. He went, and he said, my God, oh God, I want it all to stop. And he became very afraid. And I said, you know what you need to do is you're going to separate and just tell them you don't mind seeing them, but you don't want to hear them. And he said, I can do that. And I go, absolutely, because energy follows intent. You tell them you are the boss, which is the case. And years later, and this is the story I want to end with because it was so cute. I never did psychic fairs back in the day. And there was one I did, in this little town in Vermont. And I did it for charity. And I'm working there. And it was $1 a minute to talk to me, to get whatever service they wanted. So I'm sitting there and this little girl comes in with her grandmother. And she sits down in the chair and she goes, are you good at what you do? And I go, well, I some people might say yes, and maybe some might say no. And she was 8. And she said, all right, it's $1 a minute, right? And I go, yes. And she goes, okay, lady, I've got $1. I need some help. And I look at her grandmother like, is this okay? And grandmother goes, yeah. She goes, so I can't even sleep at night. They come out at night. They bother me all the time. Come out from underneath the bed. They are in the closets. They are everywhere. And I can't sleep. And I'm like, okay. So what you need to do is tell them to get out. And say it very forcefully, get out. And she looked at me, just kind of think about it. And she goes, so what you're saying, lady, is they ain't paying rent here so they can get out. And I go, that's exactly what I'm saying, honey. And she goes, good advice. And 8 years old, she was such an old soul. She lays down the $1 and she goes, thank you. And I'll take one of those. She grabs a business card and I go, you call me if you have any other problems. And she goes, I will. But this was help. And I'm like, goodbye. And it was a matter of just telling these children, including my son, that they had the power within themselves to stop all of this, to stop it, make it go away. They were the decision maker. And there's something else I wanted to mention too. Somebody mentioned the mirrors, and I think it was Dawn with the E. Would that be correct, Dawn? You spoke about the mirrors. Yeah. And yeah, I grew up afraid of mirrors. I would do anything to duck. I would cover mirrors. And it wasn't till I was in my mid-30s when I had the light turned down, and I'm going into the bathroom, I look into the mirror and I stood in front of the mirror and I could see my face start changing to different things because there was just enough light. And I went, oh God, it scared me. And that's probably what scared me as a small child, but I didn't know it until I got older. Yeah. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Thank you again for having me. And I love listening to all your stories from all of you because somehow they connect us all together.
Thank you, Alicia. I love
Alicia. Synchronicity.
Yeah. It is. It's brilliant. I say brilliant.
I love how you were totally supportive of your son. You had all the right things to say to him. You were reassuring, just like it was natural. You just go to school and I'm just going to smudge the house. I'm going to cleanse the house, just like it was, everything's fine. You're so reassuring. Like, that's incredible. And that's a really great example. If anyone's going to have a takeaway from that attitude, you know, that calmness, that reassurance. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I just love that. I love that, Alicia. Thank you.
Make
You're
it
welcome.
normal, isn't it? It's normality. Is that the right word? Just to make it normal, an everyday occurrence, and then it's no big deal. So it's
Yeah.
brilliant, Alicia.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elena, what do you have for us?
Hi. Okay, so it's all three of my children really have different stories. But the basis is when I was growing up, okay, my mum's family, they were all clairvoyant, read tea leaves. Well, it was all, you know, it was just, okay, so everyone could just talk to spirits or whatever, but it was never taught to us. So I would have been, who was it that also slept with the blankets over their head? Was that you, Jeanette? Was it? I used to sleep inside my duvet and put the duvet over my head. And it's kind of like it was there, but you didn't know what to do with it. Yeah. So when my children started experiencing things, like I knew what it was, but I didn't have the knowledge. I wasn't taught the knowledge. I back then as well, when they were younger, I didn't even know how to speak to spirit yet. I would see spirit by accident, or it was kind of episodes like that, or in dreams, but I didn't know how to do it. So my eldest daughter, when she was younger, she would have seen more when animals passed. She would see their orb, or she would know. She is very with animal spirits more than human spirits. Okay, so when her cat passed, she'd be, say, at the bathroom sink, and she'd see the orb, you know, and she'd know that that's Tiger, you know, and she'd just know. And you know, she's kind of now, she's been, you know, learning how to communicate with spirit, etc. But it's more to do with animals. She wants to kind of communicate with animal spirits, etc. Now, funny story with her is in the house we are still in, where they were brought up as well. I had a lot of spirits in the house, children's spirits, and there was this other spirit. She was a restless spirit, this lady, and we knew that she hangs out in the bathroom. You know, it was like Harry Potter's Myrtle. You know, it was the bathroom was the place for the spirits. Okay. So when my eldest daughter, she would have been, she must have been about 17, 18, and she was in the shower, and she had her back to the opening, you know, you have the shower door around you, and she had her back to it, and she was facing the wall, and she was washing her hair, and she turned around, and she saw the spirit lady with, you know, the long black hair, and she screamed. The spirit screamed, like, got a fright. And the two of them were like, you know, and she went, "Ma'am, I just saw," and her name's Amelia. And it turns out the younger daughter, the middle daughter, now she would have been about 5 years old. She had an imaginary friend called Amelia. So we're thinking, okay, this is the same lady, okay? Anyway, but that was hilarious. We knew she was around, and we knew she was there, and, you know, you'd feel her in the bathroom, but she was obviously, I don't know, but she doesn't seem to be around very much anymore. Anyway, so the middle daughter, she was quite, she didn't know how to deal with. She'd hear the spirits a lot. She would hear them, she'd see them. When she was 2 years old, she would be laughing at the armchair, and I'd be, okay, she's having a conversation with the spirit that's, you know, this was in the house just before this. So when we moved here, she was about 5 years old, and she was going to the bathroom, and she'd stand at the bathroom door, and she'd scream, "Stop the voice, make the voices stop." because she was getting a bit, I think she was getting too much, because it turned out she had ADHD and dyspraxia as well. So it didn't help getting all the, messages and voices talking all in the same time. And at the time, I was like, it's like, I told her what it is. I told her that's spirits, but I didn't know at the time what to do, or about putting, the light up or the shield, or, like Dawn said to her, like, I didn't know at the time. And it was kind of when she got to about 15, she started self-harming. And she said it's the spirit is telling her to do it and telling her that she's no good at and things like this. And I was like, okay. So I knew a very good medium who here in Ireland, and it ended up, I took her to her, and she said, look, it's she explained she needs to put the shield, close her eyes and imagine there's this beautiful white light around her, like a shield, and they can't get through it, and that worked for her. She did that, and she said it's working. And now she's 25, and she has a daughter who's nearly 2, and the daughter is giggling and talking to somebody. And Nikita woke up. My daughter Nikita, she woke up in the middle of the night, and she saw someone standing over her daughter's crib. And she said it was a boy in braces, not harmful. So she's able to deal with it now. She's able to see spirit. She's able to know now, okay, if I don't want them to come in, I don't have to let them come in, But so that was her experience. She doesn't want to do meat. She's like Dawn, she knows she has it, but she doesn't want to develop it yet. Okay. She hasn't got any interest. She's the younger boy, my 17 now, but when he was little, he was about 3 or 4. He used to, he would say, my daughter had the bedroom upstairs and no one could get up there. Like, she'd always have the door locked if she wasn't in there, or, no one would go up there. And she had a rabbit in there with her. She kept all her animals inside, okay? And he said, now she had this baby rabbit, a young rabbit, and he was about 3 years old. And Drew said, the rabbit's name was April, and he said, April's dead. And she went, no, Drew, look, she's hopping around. He's like, no, she's dead. And the next day, she was dead in the cage. And then it was a few months later, he went, Granddad's dead. And we went, oh my, we just panicked. Oh, my mum was here, and we were like, oh my God, okay. The phone rang, and it was actually my dad rang up to say my godfather died. So he had when he said Granddad died, he had obviously seen either my dad ringing up or, some part of the conversation. And he used to get night tremors, and which I found a crystal actually helped for that. But what happened is, he only revealed to me, this is about a couple of years ago, that when he would, in his room, when he would close his eyes, he would see the angel of death kind of behind him. So he'd be laying in bed with his eyes closed, and he sees it. And I'm like, okay. So I said, does it scare you? And he said, no, it's not. It doesn't scare him. He's fine. It doesn't, there's no, he doesn't, and I'm kind of surmised, okay, he did explain what he looked like. And I said, okay, maybe it sounds to me like, because you could kind of predict death, that maybe that's maybe the angel of death, or maybe it's a spirit guide that's, and I said, if you do get scared, this is what you do. And I told him then, just to ask her to go away and, to put the shield up because now I knew. But he said, no, I'm fine. He said, it doesn't scare me. And he kind of we all talk about it very openly, and even now he would tell his English teacher, oh, my mum speaks to spirits and everything. And the English teacher was like, oh, will she read my dog for me? So, it's very open in my family. But yeah, so that's their experiences. And yeah, that's the experience of my kids.
Wow. And I love how it's almost a story of how you grew with your kids. They presented it. Therefore, you sought the answer. Like you said, you went to, was it a psychic or a medium who told you what to do? So you all were growing together. Do you know what I mean? Your kids were also your teacher.
Exactly.
And yeah, that's it. That's great. That's really great. And the fact that you were open regardless of what you did and didn't know, you were still open, which is really, really, really good. So thank you, Elena. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Christian.
Hello. Well, I was a fairly psychic, mediumistic little boy, and I would talk to myself quite a lot as a little kid. And I realize now I wasn't really talking to myself. I was talking to my guides or my ancestors or whoever was there. But nevertheless, my sisters, I think, kind of thought I was weird. And to them, I kind of was weird. At any rate, what the first real story I had with my mother happened when I was around 4 or 5. And I talked to her about being in a valley with a nice stream, a very beautiful green valley. Not sure if it was in England or in Wales, but basically hills around with a very nice multi-level stone cottage there. And there was a boy that I would go to play with there who wore, what I remembered is he wore a ruff, which, is an old Elizabethan style collar. And I talked about this kid with the ruff, and this, I believe, was a part of a past life regression memory. But I remember that kid, and I also remember the, for lack of a better phrase, nanny lady who lived in this cottage. And this cottage was a place where kids on the estate would go during the day to, be taken care of and be able to play with each other when the adults didn't want them around, basically. So I talked to my mother about that, and she didn't know what a ruff was. So she had to look it up. So that was sort of the key thing. And then she had me recorded into a recorder. So it's on a recording somewhere. But that was sort of the first thing that happened. And then the second major thing that happened was I was in my bedroom when I was 6 years old, and it was late at night. And my great-great-grandmother, Sally Hatfield, appeared to me by my bed. And I was like, who is this, lady here dressed in this old gown with her hair braided and, tied up? And I got scared and I hid under the covers. And then I thought for a minute, well, why am I scared? I should find out who this lady is. Then I, put the covers back, and she was gone. She disappeared. Now, what I didn't realize at the time was that my clairvoyance was developing. I talked to my mother about what happened, but I knew my clairvoyance was developing. From that point on, though, I was never afraid of the dark, oddly enough. What I started doing is sleeping with the covers over my head, and I would start to pay attention to the images that I would get when I shut my eyes. So even though I wasn't really sort of like academically, consciously aware of what was going on, I knew as a young boy that when I went to bed at night and I shut my eyes, I would see things. And gradually, I would just go to sleep. But sometimes things would be more involved, sometimes they wouldn't be. But basically, I was developing my clairvoyance. And that was a time when I guess spirit felt it was easier to affect it. But it didn't give me nightmares. It wasn't bad. It, wasn't any of that. And then the next, I grew up with my mom, and my mom was into astrology, and she this is before the days of computer apps, and she would do our astrology charts by hand, and it was she taught to me a little bit about my psychic sensitivity because I had Sun, Moon, Venus, North Node, and Cancer all in the 8th house. I also had Mercury and Leo, but that too was also in the 8th house. So I had all this stuff going on in the 8th house, which has to do with death and rebirth and psychic metaphysical connection. And so I was fully aware, and my mother was sensitive to it, and she would encourage it. And as I grew up, I remember in retrospect, me talking to myself a lot, and people coming in, who are you talking to? And I would just say myself, but I realize now that most of that dialogue wasn't my inner analytical mind. It was dialogue between myself and spirit. So I feel very, very fortunate that I had a mother who was aware of my developing psychic mediumship abilities and was willing to subtly encourage that as best she could. I mean, there was no guidebook for that. And, we lived in suburban Cleveland area in Ohio. And but I was exposed. I mean, she went to a few mediums to have readings. She would talk about that. She'd been to a few spiritualist lectures, and she would talk about that. But she never tried to push me in any way. She just let it evolve and go. Then when I was 17, I was at my grandparents' house, and my great-great-grandmother, Sally Hatfield, who'd appeared to me when I was 6, appeared to me again. Okay, and when I say she appeared to me, I don't mean like in the third eye. Both of these appearances were objective clairvoyance. She's out here. Okay, only this time, I could recognize her for who she was. I could feel her. I could feel the love. I felt very blessed. And it was all very, very, very positive. And then she, a few years later, when I was 22, and my grandparents who lived in that house had transitioned to spirit, I was down there again. And in that same room where she had appeared to me the second time, she appeared to me third time, but this time with my grandma and grandpa here. So, and that was phenomenal. That just blew me away. And so I put that, in my back pocket, and, I did my professional life and really didn't go back to mediumship per se until I was 37, when my mother transitioned to spirit, at my 47. Got to think, she died in 2007. So it wasn't until 2007 that I really, when she appeared to me, informing me of the fact that she had died and all this stuff, that I decided I really needed to do something professional. So that's my story. So the key thing, I think, is to hopefully have enlightened parents or an enlightened spiritual person in a child's life who accepts what's going on and does not belittle it in any way, but encourages them to get in touch with that and build upon it.
Yeah, 100%, Christian. That is really, really great advice. And I love the way you say to have someone in a child's life. You know, it doesn't need to be the parent if this is beyond their, abilities or skills, or, they don't believe in it. But to have someone, even if it's a friend or another family member, to be there for the child, even if it's counselling, that they can openly express what they're feeling or hearing or seeing. Just the fact that they're heard is really what's important. So thank you for that advice.
The other thing that I want to mention is while growing up with these gifts, I was just me. I didn't think any of this was special. I didn't think it was unusual. It was just me. It wasn't really till, I probably was in high school or later that I really realized that most people don't experience a lot of stuff.
That's it. Yeah. And again, though, you could be you because you had the support around you.
Right.
You had the encouragement. Thank you, Christian. Thank you. Kim.
Hello. I have a couple of stories. So one happened about 10 years ago. At that time, there was a mother and two little girls renting the basement. And one day, the younger girl, and I will call her Mary, which is not her real name, Mary came to me and she was really stressed and upset. And she told me that she saw a man in the basement. I was like, uh-oh, it's the same man that's been around from time to time. So I, taking the knowledge that I had gathered from reading books, watching shows, and, advice from other psychic mediums, right? So I took that advice and I applied that to Mary. And I said, okay, what did he look like? What did he do? What happened? And I showed total interest, but I didn't dramatize. I didn't say, oh my God, this is something evil or anything like that. So, and I went downstairs with her and I said, look, all you got to do is say, go away, and I did make a big deal on that, forcefully. And I gave her the tools and I could tell and sense her feeling changing, like, oh, cool, okay, this is great. And she felt so much better. And she's never had a problem again that I'm aware of, right? She didn't come back to me with any more, scary moments for her. So I want to thank the public and, the knowledge of books that people share in books and so forth. So I appreciate that. And it's just basically passing it on. And then another story, it involves my grandson, 4 going on 5, and everybody left the house, this house here. And I was babysitting. They were working on a project. And it was going on 9 at night. And I said to my grandson, come on, let's go to bed. So we go upstairs, and the mattress is still on the floor because the house is still in rehab. We had moved in the year before. And all of his Thomas the Tank train toys and tracks are all over the floor on the main floor. So we go to bed, mattress is on the floor. He gets up. I'm like, where are you going? I got to go get my train. He goes downstairs. Next thing I know, I can hear him running up the stairs really fast. And I'm like, I just knew there was a spirit. I knew there was a female, dark skin or black woman spirit in the house. And he ran in, drove under the covers, in hiding, huddling next to me. And I'm like, what did you see? I saw an angry woman. And I said, black? Okay, well, sometimes spirits just come and visit. So don't worry about it, And then a week later, I'm babysitting again. My family is trying to finish a project outside the house. I go in the laundry room and he follows me. And it popped in my mind And I said to my grandson while I was changing laundry, I said, remember that lady, you saw last week? And all of a sudden I could feel the energy around me. And then my grandson said, she's here. She's here, And then I stopped doing what I was doing with the dryer and I turned to be side by side with my grandson. I felt him to see which way he was facing. So I lined up with them. And I said, sometimes they just have a story to tell. And the next thing I know, my grandson said, she's running away and this man is chasing her. And she's so scared. She actually had to kill him to stop him from hurting her. And I'm actually getting chills right now. So I could feel the energy and I was like, oh, wow, that's okay, So she told you her story. So that was an amazing experience. It unfolded over 2 different, visitations from the spirit. And it was just amazing how he was able to explain what he was seeing. I don't know if he was just seeing it clairvoyantly or hearing it or what, but he was perceiving it. I think I handled it well. And he was able to relay it, and both of us sensing it in different ways. The story came out. But the funny thing is, I don't think my grandson remembers this anymore. So, but that's a story that I will never forget. That was special.
Wow. And it's great, like Christian said earlier, to have someone in a child's life that can help them with this, that can support them with this. So both children were lucky to have you there to support them through this and give them the strength and courage, you know what I mean, to not be afraid and to have some kind of explanation and reasoning around it. Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do any of you mediums, any of you, have any questions for each other? Because I think we've had some pretty amazing experiences. Oh, Jeanette, you're waving.
Oh, yeah. So I think, Elena, you spoke about crystals and you spoke about, I believe it's one of your children having, like, we call them here in the States, like night terrors or night horrors. I have a niece who, she's 10 and they're still going on. She's adopted. She was 2 years old when she came to the United States from China. And from the very beginning, I sensed something in the room that they were going to put her in. However, going back to, like, my mom was Catholic, my dad wasn't. Although my sister would be open to this, she probably wouldn't want to hear it if it came from another source. So I'm very interested in the crystals, of what you used, what crystal in particular, and any other information or specifics that you might have, because I know a lot from my therapy with children in my past work, a lot of children suffer from night horrors. And I've often thought, because in psychology, you don't really entertain it's a visiting spirit. And if I were to say that to a parent, I would have lost all my clients. So, but a lot of times that's what I thought. And I would kind of work on my own and send protection. But tell me a little bit more about that. I'm really interested in that.
Okay, so my son, like, he would literally wake up screaming. He would call them, like, he'd say he had a bad thought. That's what he'd call it. Like, especially, it was almost seems to happen as well before he'd fall asleep, like properly fall asleep. He'd be going to sleep, and I suppose it would be at what you'd call now the meditative state, before sleep.
Right.
And he would wake up. Yeah. So it could be the middle of the night, or it could be before he goes to sleep. And he would always refer to it as a bad thought. And he would see this whole thing playing out in his head, and usually involved, like, say, he'd have this fear of me dying or something. But I was in the crystal, I was in the shop, in the crystal shop, and there was this blue crystal, Now, I will get the proper name for it for you. I just refer to it as the blue crystal. And they said this is still also when I was learning about crystals and things like that. Okay. So they said this is for bad dreams. So what I thought, okay, I bought the crystal. I knew to do the cleanse and charge it in the moonlight. And then I put it inside the pillowcase underneath his pillow. So he didn't know it was there. Because I thought this was my way of going, okay, I'm going to test out to see if this works. I'm going to test the crystal.
Right.
So if I tell him it's there and it worked, it could be just a mind over matter, right? So I put the crystal underneath the pillow in the pillowcase. So he didn't know it was there. And he didn't get night terrors anymore. It just stopped. And it was, I thought, okay, I left it. I let it, a couple of weeks. And then I said to him, I actually put this crystal underneath your pillow. And he actually slept with this crystal until he was about 13 or 14. And even if he went to sleep at a friend's house, he would ring me up and say, Mom, I forgot my crystal. And I would have to go and give it to him because he didn't know it was there in the beginning, he obviously then realized it works. Do you know, he believed then it worked. But I call it the blue crystal, but I obviously it has a name on it. I will get the name and I'll put it in. Can
I ask you a second question? You mentioned fear of death. Is that what you said?
Oh, no, he had this fear of something happening to me. He always had this bad thought and he would see things playing out in his head about like I would die or and then he was about 9 years old and he was sitting on the sofa and he just started bursting out crying and he said, Mom, I'm scared if I die, I'm going to be on my own. And he was just crying. He said, I'm scared to die. And I said to him, no, I said, you won't be on your own. And, he like the whole thing with him has always been, he could tell death and death was seen to be around him. And, I said, when he saw whatever it is, the angel of death or whoever it is that stands behind him, he's not scared of it anymore.
Right. This seems to be a repetitive theme with my niece as well. If she hears, so-and-so had cancer, adults are carrying cancer. Who's cancer? They're going to die from cancer. Am I going to die from cancer? But since she was 7 years, it's like an obsession that's far beyond anything that would be in the norm. And she really hasn't had an experience where a person very close to her has passed from that. I've wondered if it's like a past life where sometimes there isn't enough resolution before they come in and reincarnate. And you'll see all of these things. Children have memories of death or, tragic passing or something. But thank you very much. I'm going to pass the crystal. I'm going to just, drop that. Hey, have you considered maybe crystals or something? Have you looked into that for her? And because it is like screaming, like somebody is, murdering her wrist. She still sleeps most of the time. Either my sister will go into her room and half the time she doesn't really get a full night's sleep. She had a 7-night week. My sister will maybe get 2 or 3 if she's lucky. And then it was the age of sleepovers. So that is not happening because she's scared to go and sleep over somebody's house and not be able to go into mommy's bed. So I'm pretty sure that there's a lot more happening there that is not visible, that is not understood, and that maybe could be resolved. I don't know, maybe with your blue crystal. We'll see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh no, I'll let you know what it is.
I've got something to add that I'm listening to this and I'm going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You could be talking about my childhood. 100%. I'm going.
You're telling me that my niece is going to turn into you, Dawn. This is really scary now.
I know. So sorry about that. Really
now I'm
sorry.
Gonna have nightmares. I'm going to have nightmares now. Okay.
It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. But no, I used to really struggle with terrible nightmares. horrific. Yeah, I'd wake up and, absolutely petrified. And I'm just trying to think now, was it a dream or was it actually physically And I was physically feeling people in the room. And that's just hit me in my head now. And I'd go running into my mum's, but I would have this horrific recurring dream of I'd be in our bathroom and I'd be washing my socks in the sink. Why I was doing it in the sink, I have no idea. And, I'm talking that I was like 10, 12, something like that. Never washed my own socks. And then from the room, oh God, this is so scary. From the room down the hallway, which led to my younger sister's room, my youngest sister, this is in my dream, would float out of her bed and float towards me in the bathroom. I'd look around and see this floaty body thing of my sister coming towards me, absolutely petrified. I'd wake up screaming, run into my mum's bedroom. Was I dreaming or was I actually seeing a spirit? And you know how sometimes your spirit guides try to make things not as scary for you. So maybe they put my sister's head on this, thing in my dream. God knows, but
yeah. Or you just saw her actually in that state where the spirit separates from the body. A million different.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a big problem. It's a big problem. I mean, there's therapists that specialize just in that. I mean, that's where she's at now. Right. She started. She needed help. She didn't know what else.
And it's awful for a child to. I mean, I'm 58, so I've just come to this conclusion now. So it's awful for a child not to be able to understand what the hell is going on. But I do now firmly believe that I was seeing my sister astral traveling.
Yeah.
Because I have astral traveled for years and years and years. So was I traveling out of my body and then I'd turn around and then I'd see her behind me like a ghost? Petrifying.
Yeah.
No wonder, I get scared.
Well,
so
yeah.
Or am I?
You've had some life experiences that have, I guess, fed that fear, especially from a young age.
So that's 175 an hour there. I'll do calculations and bill you. It'll be a little bit more. Your buck stars right now.
I'll buy you a coffee, okay? That'll be your payment. A coffee and a chat. Wow. But yeah, I mean, seriously, when kids are petrified, and if somebody's not kind of like making it normal, mind you, in saying that, I never really spoke to my mum about it. Who was it who was saying that they didn't really talk about it? Yeah, Jeanette. It's just like
well,
I don't know whether that's resilience in a kid. Going, oh, okay, well, it's like stiff upper lip type thing, it's happened. What am I going to do about it? Until the next time it happens, then you're petrified and then you get over it. So it's that circle of fear, acceptance.
Without resolution, which is what I said.
Yeah.
It wasn't a resolution until I grew up and I started figuring this stuff out. And I'm like, oh, that was astral traveling. Oh, that was trance. So, and still figuring it out and learning and developing every day. Yeah.
Well,
but it's horrific. And as a parent, you can't help them. And they're like, horrible. I was there once for it. I'm like, what is happening? I don't know. The older sister's like, no, that's Coco. She's, this is happening. I'm like, wow. Yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it? How, even now, this evening, there's been that realization of what something was when, I was a child. God, we're talking 50 years ago this happened.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot that plays into some of these situations as well. For example, culture, religion, different beliefs in society.
The era. I've written era 3 times on my paper.
Yes.
So many different stories where it was just the era where it wasn't spoken of. It wasn't an acceptable part of society. Yet my mum would constantly talk about ghost stories.
Right. Or
But when
Scotland was saying that her son mentioned it to the teacher. If that happened in the States, the teacher would be going, your son, I need to have a
therapist
meeting with you. Please come in. He mentioned this, and it would be like a huge problem. Not, hey, set me up with your mom. I want to talk to my dead dog or whatever. No, that would not happen.
But sorry, can I just say as well with Nikita, you know, when she was like 15 and she was doing the self-harming and she said it was spirit telling her, she said there was a man and there was a woman as well. And she had to go to the doctors for some reason, and he had obviously saw the self-harming, and it was okay. He referred her to the children's psychology place. And I was like, oh, here we go. Because they would automatically go look for schizophrenia or, Anyway, we're sitting there with the child psychologist, and he then speaks with her and everything. And he turned around, he came back to me and he said, look, I think you should go with what's in your family about speaking with spirits. He said, she told me about it, and I think you should go and see the medium. And
Fantastic.
I was, what? Hang on, what? And you would never hear a psychologist say that, not in a million years. And it was just so weird. And she just felt good as well, because he was like, she's not multiple personality. She's not got voices in her head. It's what's in your family. And he was totally with the whole speaking with spirits. And I was just like, oh, okay.
So again, that's interesting, isn't it? I think when we grew up, we were at the tail end of the Victorian kind of like era, mentality, shouldn't be spoken about, don't be stupid, it's nothing, you're not seeing it, and disregarding it because it was classed as witchcraft.
Yeah. Yep. The devil's work. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. But now we're seeing psychologists going, go to see a medium. And I think that's really, really healthy. Don't automatically assume your child is, off their rocker. Think of all the possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to encourage, sorry, Alicia, go on.
I just wanted to get this out before, of course, and I need to say it. There's something that very interesting happens to mostly girls in prepubescent when they're going to be starting to menstruate, that they can create their own PK. So, remember the Stephen King movie Carrie, where very similar. And I've dealt with 4 different cases of the parent coming to me thinking that the child, this was activity from an entity outside of the child, and it was no more than their own energy creating these things to happen. And I don't know why I needed to say that, but I wanted to get it out there. So, yeah. Thank you.
Alicia, what is PK?
That would be energy, a movement of energy. So taking energy and moving things. Psychokinesis.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Got you.
That's sort of like poltergeist energy, right?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, because people think of poltergeist, and Dawn, thank you for saying that, because people get poltergeist confused with playful ghost, but it's actually poltergeist activity is coming from this
within. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I want to encourage the audience who's listening to put their comments, wherever they're watching from, the platform, put in a comment. If you've got a story or you've got a question for any of our mediums or the panel, please, I encourage you to share your story with us, share your question. And I'll put all everybody's details in the show notes as well. So if anyone wants to contact any of you for further information, or just in general, they've got something they want to share with, an individual person, then by all means, please, I encourage that. And if you've got a topic that you would like us to talk about and discuss, I welcome that as well. Does anybody have any last words before we wrap this up?
I think as a mum and as a medium and as a kid who obviously had scary experiences, I think it's as a parent, it's recognizing when a child's behavior is not the normal behavior, and understanding that children sometimes don't have the language to explain, because I certainly didn't, what's actually going on in their head. Crying at school. Why am I crying? Why didn't I even tell my mum I was crying in school? And I was ashamed. Having the nightmares, my mum would ask, I'd jump into her bed. What was it about? I'm like, oh, I don't know. But I do know, because it was repetitive dreams or nightmares. So watch your children when they're scared. Try to, comfort them, and then try to get them to talk about it. Don't force it, but, allow them to have the opportunity to speak about it if they need to.
Yeah, create that safe space.
To it.
Create that safe space. Yeah,
definitely.
Just add to that, because we talked about fear of adults, and the other side of that is to be embarrassed. So say, you talk about it with another individual. At least in my country, right, in the U.S., it's not a given where you go in and you say, oh, my kid had these. You think she's seeing ghosts? You think she's seeing? The other parents would be like, what? I'm late for Pilates. I gotta see later. I'll see you. So have the courage to overcome that. And I think that those opportunities present themselves, right, when you're having conversations with them, doors open. And I think the more people are able to talk about things like this, the more help will be attained. You connect, like in our conversation today, a lot of us we clicked into memories and we're like, oh man, that's what that was. Same thing. When it's your kid, nothing should stop you. So have the courage to face that embarrassment and ask questions. Ask your therapist that's seeing your kid, hey, could this be a spirit? That's, what do you think about that? And research. I mean, today you could do a lot of this on your own. So, but I see embarrassment stops people, at least here, quite a bit from, and then once you do cross that threshold, oh yeah, you too. You'd be surprised how many people are actually seeing and sensing the same things, because it's a very, I think, inborn natural ability for most of us.
It's being brave enough to open up the conversation. It's being brave enough to open up the conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it definitely is. And I think what you touched on there, Jeanette, about it being a natural ability. So when I first started going to a development circle, I was being taught stuff and I was going, well, I've been doing this all my life. Don't normal people experience this? And the medium would go, no. And I'm like, oh, so, the way that we think as well has an impact on, getting yourself out there and just kind of like being open enough to have that conversation. I mean, I once said to my mum, I wish my bloody head would shut up. And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, all this chatter in my head is driving me insane. And then I stopped myself and I went, what's in your head? And she went, nothing.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God, I must be mental. But no, maybe it wasn't mentalness, it was spirit chatter.
You didn't put up the do not disturb sign.
Yeah, should have done.
That's it. Exactly. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. I know this has been a long recording for everybody, but a big topic and a necessary one that I feel needs to be discussed. And most likely, especially, again, we're coming into a different age and a different era that is at the forefront of questions needing answers for many parents, grandparents, friends, aunties, uncles. These things are happening, and not just to children, but to adults as well. So I want to thank each and every one of you for your wisdom, your knowledge, your courage to speak about your own experience as well. And I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes below. And almost all of you have already had previous interviews and episodes. So if you're watching this, please like, share, and subscribe. And also go back and have a look at the previous episodes. Again, I'm going to put those in the show notes to make it easier to find each and every one of you. Thank you again, guys. And I look forward to our next topic on the Medium's Table.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Thank you.
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me at the Medium's Table. The universe is always speaking. Listen and let your spirit soar. Curious for more? Click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe.